Om Tavagatamratam Tapta Jivanam Kaviviriditham Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvigananti Bhurirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on chapter 10, The Master with the Brahmo Devotees. It's April 22nd, 1883, and we're on page 218. And Sri Ramakrishna is talking to one of the preachers of the Brahmo Samaj. The nature of Brahman cannot be described. About it one remains silent. Who can explain the infinite in words? However high a bird may soar, there are regions higher still. What do you say? Preacher: Yes, sir. It is so stated in the Vedanta philosophy. Master: Once a salt doll went to the ocean to measure its depth, but it could not come back to give a report. According to one school of thought, sages like Shukadeva saw and touched the ocean of Brahman, but did not plunge into it. This is a very interesting idea that we find many places in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. I take this salt doll illustration to have two different meanings and used in two different contexts. Sometimes Sri Ramakrishna seems to be saying that an ordinary person, anyone other than Avatar or Ishtwarakoti, what he calls a Jivakoti. Tagore has this division that those who are born with some special mission, those who are already perfect, Nitya Siddha, they're born only for the welfare of others, represent one very small class of people who come at a certain time, usually accompanying the avatar, and everyone else is a Jivakoti. So sometimes he'll explain that if the Jivakoti, which will be, I don't like to say ordinary person because they're extraordinary if they can have this realization, but if they get to the very bottom of the ocean, or as he says, the Shukadeva saw and touched the ocean of Brahma but not plunge into it. So either they plunge into it, or if we think it the other way, they're just going deeper and deeper and they get to the very bottom of it, which means Nirvikalpa Samadhi. That if they get plunged, merged in the highest state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, they'll be like the salt doll that stayed too long in the water, and there's nothing to come back, that they completely merge in the water. And so then, who is there to come back into this physical body even? Now, we may say that why are we trying to have this Nirvikalpa Samadhi if it means that we'll give up the body? Well, again, there are many different ways of looking at this. Different types of Nirvikalpa Samadhi doesn't sound right. Nirvikalpa Samadhi means there's no vritti. How can there be any degree of lack of vrittis? But in practicality, it seems that there can be merging into the Nirvikalpa Samadhi state and coming back out of it without staying too long. Sri Ramakrishna says some people don't like to stay in that state too long. He doesn't say Ishtwarakotis at that time. Other times he'll say some people can reach that state, just like the mongoose can get to the top of the wall, but the brick will pull it back down. So what we're talking about here is those who fully merge in that Nirvikalpa state. And if we want to tie this together with the theory of prarabdha karma, that means that they until they've exhausted all of their old karma, have no desires left whatsoever. They won't be able to enter into that state, and that would be the state where they would give up the body anyhow. So we can look at it more, not that they've entered into Nirvikalpa Samadhi and give up the body, but that this would have been the time of their passing anyhow. This is how they're leaving the world, in that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. One way to understand it. There are many, many different ways. Now, the second thing, when Tagore uses this example, he's talking about even those who come back from Samadhi. So try to imagine that the salt dal, by the time it gets to the bottom, it's no longer in that form anymore. But Sri Ramakrishna could come back. Now, if he could come back, he should be able to tell us what it's like. But somehow, in his case, that even he doesn't have any individuality at that point, like the salt dal. But that individuality comes back, so that even Sri Ramakrishna can come, even though he can come back from that Nirvikalpa Samadhi state, which he did on a daily basis, he still couldn't give a report of what it was like at the bottom. So it's used in two senses. One, and this is the second sense that seems to be here, is that no one can say what Brahman is like, even those who experience it. And the other is that those who have that highest experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi will give up the body, Tagore says, in 21 days. Now, that wasn't his, he heard that from one sadhu. I don't remember if it was the Vaishnava Charan, maybe another sadhu, or the Rishikesh sadhu. Somebody told him that. Tagore heard lots of things. He didn't accept everything, but if he heard something and found it to be true, he always gave credit. There's an interesting thing when we go through. He'll say that this sadhu from Rishikesh, or this I heard from this devotee, or Vaishnava Charan said this, and now I understand it to be true. So when he talks about Shukadeva, because people would say, well, Shukadeva came back after having that highest realization. So Tagore would say, yeah, some people say yes. Other people say, no, even if he had gone into that ocean of Satchidananda, he also would have merged in it. So this is two optional points of view of the first one. That either if anybody gets merged too deeply in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, they won't come back. Even the avatar, because the Tagore kept praying to the Divine Mother, Mother, don't let me lose that individuality. He had to hear the Divine Mother say, remain in Bhavamukha. He had to get that horrible dysentery, which put so much pain in his physical body that the mind came down. Otherwise, who knows if he could have come down from that state. Because there's no one to do it. The I is gone. That individuality is gone. So this is a big question throughout the gospel. Who can actually become a vijnani? Who can come back from reaching the roof? Do we simply get to the higher rung and look over and say, aha? Can we get to the top and spend a little time, sing and dance, then come back down on the ladder? If we stay too long, do we jump over to the other side? Remember the four friends? So I've always been intrigued by this question. And when we go through, we'll see that there are a lot of nuances to this. And Tagore gives slightly different answers at different times. But we have to understand one thing. Tagore does believe in Jivan Mukti, that one can be a free soul and live in this world. Does that mean that we don't have to have Nirvikalpa Samadhi to get realization, to become liberated souls? Again, there are different views. He'll say that through the path of devotion also, we can attain that same height. But does that mean that we go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi through the path of devotion, or lower types of Samadhi? I like this idea that we don't have to have Nirvikalpa Samadhi to become illumined, because this is what we find in the path of knowledge, in the Upanishads, in Vivekachudamani, that simply this flash comes of awareness, not in meditation, not with the mind perfectly still and empty, but the mind perfectly filled with this idea. This floods the mind. But I'm going to say this just to complicate things, not to clarify things. I remember hearing a lecture by Swami Atmajnanananda, and he said there's no liberation without Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So I'm also completely confused. I can only assume that we can have this Nirvikalpa Samadhi experience, but not stay in it too long. Something will have to bring the mind back down again, maybe some karma, some desire, something like that, in order for us to live in the world as Jivan Muktas. Or it may be that we can get this, live in the world as a free soul through these other spiritual paths without the highest type of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Or maybe there are levels of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, who knows? Very hard to say. There shouldn't be, but I think that we find Tagore sometimes he went into a very deep state of Samadhi. What does that mean? It means a little harder for him to bring the mind back down again. So theoretically there should be no distinction. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But in practical life we see that sometimes Tagore went into a deeper state and sometimes the mind came down sooner. They would repeat something in his ear. Interestingly, when Tagore got into the mood of Shiva, there was one time when they were singing a lot of songs to Shiva, and he went into a very deep state. Now, depending upon what triggered his samadhi, it would be a different type of samadhi. If it's some dualistic school and some highly devotional school, then possibly he'll be having visions and everything. Shiva represents the absolute. So on this one occasion, it took a long time for the devotees to bring his mind back down. He used to tell them, you repeat the name, if it's one song that sends me into that mood, you repeat that name, Shiva, or you repeat Mother, something like that. So finally he said, when you sing these songs of Shiva, there's a danger that I'll go into this state of samadhi. Sing something about the Divine Mother, something like that. So even for Sri Ramakrishna, there were different levels of his Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Swamiji, when he had his Nirvikalpa Samadhi experience, which was verified by Sri Ramakrishna in Kashipur, how long did it last? We don't know. Maybe a half hour, 20 minutes? Not long. Because shortly after that, first of all, Swami Atmajnananda, the elder Gopal, he wasn't yet a Swami, he ran up and told Sri Ramakrishna. And Tagore said, let him remain in that state for some time. But then shortly after, they had some conversation. I don't know how long. So even Swamiji, either he couldn't stay in that state too long, or wasn't meant to stay in that state too long, or Tagore played a trick and brought his mind back down. These are very, very difficult questions to...
Swami, Shiva, when you think about Shiva, is it a kind of Nirvikalpa or...
Yeah, Shiva, worshippers of Shiva can be of two types. They can think of Shiva as Baba, and have devotional relationship, think of the human form, anthropomorphic form.
Yeah.
Or Shiva can represent the infinite absolute. Shivoham, I am Shiva. Shivoham, Shivoham, that feeling of oneness. And in general, even worshipping Shiva in a devotional way doesn't prevent one from feeling that oneness. Whereas worshipping the avatars or Narayana, the Vaishnava schools, and generally they won't have that attitude. Devotees of the Divine Mother, they can go either way. They can say, Saham, Saham, I am she. There'll be some who will do that. Generally they won't though. Generally they'll like that relationship. But they'll accept the truth of oneness and prefer the relationship. They'll want to taste sugar, not become sugar. That'll be the distinction for them. But devotees of Shiva will see that tremendous devotion. I remember I went to Kedarnath one time and seeing people with such tremendous devotion walking step after step, Jai Baba Kedarnath, Jai Baba Kedarnath, tremendous devotion. But no antagonism to the idea of oneness, generally, for the worshippers of Shiva. Whereas those who worship any of the forms of Narayana, that means the avatars also, mostly Rama and Krishna, they will have a little antagonism towards this idea of absolute oneness. They'll like this idea that we're part of God, or we're a devotee of God, something like that. I started early today. It is said that there are places near Kedar. This is Kedarnath. This is up in the Himalayas. It's a beautiful place. They had horrible flooding some years ago, huh? And the whole road and most, but fortunately the temple wasn't damaged. But anyhow, they had to rebuild everything to get there. I went there many years ago, and it's tremendous feeling there. The Shiva Lingam is just a stone. It's what they call a natural Shiva Lingam. Some are formed. They'll polish a stone and give it the normal shape. Shankaracharya is said to have passed away there. His Samadhi Pit is there. He's also said to have passed away in Kanchipuram. So nobody knows exactly. The two different traditions are there, but there's tremendous atmosphere there. And I remember walking. You don't see Kedarnath is a mountain also. This is just like Shiva represents the Himalayas. Huh? So when you're walking up, you don't see it until you're fairly close, and then because you're kind of going around, and then you turn one corner and you look up and it's straight up. It's fantastic. Snow white, just like Shiva, Snow White. This is Kedarnath. And the water is so cold. We took a bath, which means jumped in and came right out. Yeah, maybe 1 second in there. It's ice water. It's just, a little bit further up, it's just the snow that melts and comes down. So it is said that there are places near Kedar that are covered with eternal snow. He who climbs too high cannot come back. So again, this is Nirvikalpa Samadhi or too deeply in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. It's hard to say. Cannot come back. Those who have tried to find out what there is in the higher regions or what one feels there have not come back to tell us about it. So this will be that one, Jivakotis, that won't be able to come back. But Tagore will talk about even him, Ishtwarakotis, that in that state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, there's no individuality. There's no one there to observe what it's like. There was an incident, we'll get to it later, where Sri Ramakrishna wanted to explain to the devotees what it feels like going through when Kundalini rises to all the different chakras. And he could explain, here you see light, here you see this, and here you have visions, gods and goddesses. Every time he started saying, when you get to the Sahasrara, as soon as he would say that thing, he would lose consciousness. And then come back and say, oh no, now I'll control myself. I really want to tell you what it's like. And again, as soon as he would think about that, he'd be gone. And then they said, with tears in his eyes, he said, it's simply not possible. Mukhe bola jaina, one cannot say in that state what that experience is like. One has to experience it. So they say it's like someone who mukha, who can't speak. How does he explain what something tastes like? Mukha swadavat. There's an expression. Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah. After having the vision of God, man is overpowered with bliss. He becomes silent. Who will speak? Who will explain? The king lives beyond 7 gates. At each gate sits a man endowed with great power and glory. At each gate the visitor asks, is this the king? The gatekeeper answers, no, not this, not this. The visitor passes through the 7th gate and becomes overpowered with joy. He is speechless. This time he doesn't have to ask, is this the king? The mere sight of him removes all doubts. How do we know if we've had the highest experience? We won't have any doubts in that state. Because all doubts are removed, all karma is burned up, all the knots of the heart are untied, and we'll feel that tremendous joy. Now, what about people who have some type of delusion? I've met people that are convinced that the CIA are after them, that they'll suffer from different types of delusive ideas. You can't convince them other. They'll be more certain about this than someone who's had God realization. Even Tagore, even after the vision of Mother Kali. A little doubt came into his mind, and he didn't do it with the help of the guru or following any regular spiritual practices. It didn't align very much with things in the scriptures. He wanted to do it again, experience it in other ways. Even when Narendra would tell him, these are all hallucinations, these visions and everything, little doubt would come. He said, oh, I went to the Divine Mother. She said, don't listen to that boy. That everything you saw is real. But, so what about people who are suffering some type of delusion? They're convinced. You won't see that joy and bliss. So we have to have both. That we know that we had some experience, and it frees us, and we have perfect joy from that. Preacher, yes sir, it is so described in Vedanta. Master, when the Godhead is thought of as creating, preserving, and destroying, it is known as the personal God, Saguna Brahman, or the primal energy, Adya Shakti. Again, when it is thought of as beyond the three gunas, then it is called attributeless reality, Nirguna Brahman, beyond speech and thought. This is the Supreme Brahman, Para Brahman. Now, I'm going to take exception a little bit to the translation here. Only because, first of all, let me say that I think Swami Nikhilanandaji did an unbelievable job with the English translation. There are things that are left out, there are things that the order is changed a tiny bit, but all of the important teachings, when Tagore says something, he has a beautiful way of explaining it, catching the meaning of it. One or two places where there's a slight little distinction, and he wasn't the only one. He had his editors and people advised him what to write and everything. So this is certainly not a criticism of the translation, but this personal God, Saguna Brahman, there's nothing in there except Saguna Brahman. That's his translation, personal God. Saguna Brahman in Vedanta is not exactly the personal God. This is personal God. The term that really fits better is Bhagavan. And Bhagavan is not part of traditional Vedanta from the Upanishads. This will be from the devotional schools. Now the reason I mention this is that in the Upanishads, our Saguna Brahman is there, of course, but it's not, this is our Ishtwara. Ishtwara is Saguna Brahman. Ishtwara is not someone that they pray to, is not someone who has the virtues of love and kindness and mercy and will bestow grace and all of that. It's still impersonal. The gunas that it has will be mostly these Shaktis. So it's really Saguna Brahman, and is really kind of a Sashakti. It's that it has the power to project the universe, to uphold the universe, and withdraw the universe. Three main powers. When we talk about Bhagavan is also, Bhagas are also like gunas. And there are different theories, of course, but there are supposed to be six Bhagas, six of these divine qualities that fall under the category of Aishwarya, the lordly. So these will be courage and strength, the Bala, Tejas, all of these different things. And there'll be six Madhurya qualities. These will be the sweet ones, that love, compassion, kindness, and everything. This will belong more to the devotional schools. So in Vedanta, we don't really have this idea of the personal God. I've mentioned it before, but it was very striking to me. Swami Lokeshwaranandaji. Many of you, of course, saw him. He came to this country a couple of times, but he was in charge of the Institute of Culture for many years, a fantastic speaker, and a very clear thinker, and a very wonderful, loving person. I was very, very fond of him. Anyhow, he spoke in Hollywood one time, and I went there, and he started with the words, "There is no personal God in Vedanta." It was kind of shocking. I don't know if he did it for shock effect or not, because we're so used to worshiping the personal God. What he meant was in Vedanta, strictly meaning in the Upanishads. So the Ishvara is also impersonal, but it's not actionless. So the Supreme Brahman will be just pure consciousness. And when Brahman is seen together with Shakti, then we have Ishvara, or Divine Mother. And this power will be mostly this Chit Shakti, to project this universe and everything. The personal God, a little bit of our own superimposition of qualities and attributes and things like that. And a little bit of this idea, God dwelling within the heart as the Antaryaman, as the inner controller, the inner guide, the one that we pray to, the one that can answer prayers. Some people will say that this is the role of the avatar, that the avatar will be the one who will remain in some personal state, will answer our prayers. These are all different ways of trying to understand something that's essentially very mysterious. Very hard to... So anyhow, just it is known as the personal God. Really, in what Tagore is saying, it is known as Saguna Brahman or Adya Shakti. So this Saguna Brahman, I would say, would just be a Brahman together with this power, the power of projection, and that Shakti, and or the Adya Shakti. So that means is Adya Shakti, the primal energy. When Tagore talks about this, he doesn't mean the primal energy as something separate from that which possesses the primal energy. Shakti and Shaktimat are one and the same. This is his view of that, say, Mother Kali or the Divine Mother is not the Shakti of Brahman. That the Divine Mother herself is both. Just when we think of Brahman together with Shakti, then we can use that term. Divine Mother or Shakti, Adya Shakti. It's not, otherwise Shakti is just some inert power. It doesn't so Tagore is not worshipping Mother Kali, is just that half of this whole, he's worshipping her as everything together. The illustration that I like best, that I've heard from Swami Swamiji so many times, is about the woman and the mother. You're probably sick of hearing me say this, but it's such a nice interpretation that when the woman, when she has that power to give birth. That power can't be understood as existing in any way other than as part of the woman. It has no separate existence. It has to be there. But it's not always active. When it's not active, we simply call her a woman. When she has a child, then she becomes a mother. But the woman aspect is always there. She doesn't cease to become a woman. The child is not there, then she's not the mother anymore. So this is that relationship between Nirguna and Saguna Brahman. We shouldn't think that Brahman is one thing and Ishwara is another thing. And even Bhagavan another thing. That these are all one and the same. All one and the same. Just one is with this power manifest, the other potential power. And the third one is God dwelling within the heart, connected to us, the inner guide, which we worship as a personal God.
Swamiji,
yeah.
How different it will be from Sankhya idea, Purusha and Prakriti?
Yeah, the Sankhya idea, Purusha and Prakriti, these are two halves which kind of work together but are eternally separate.
Eternally separate.
Yeah, so the Sankhya is a system that it's essentially dualistic from the point of view of Prakriti, nature, on one side, and Purusha on the other side, and dualistic also in the sense that there are many individual jivas, which they also call Purushas. So we have this Ardhanarishwara. We see these statues that half Shiva, half Parvati, half male, half female, only one figure. This is closer to what Tagore means, but for Tagore really there's only one. And sometimes this power is active, sometimes it's inactive. That's all. So he can't imagine that Shakti could have, or what they call Prakriti, could have any existence separate from Ishwara. In the Sankhya system, Purusha has to be present. They have to be close to each other. They give the example of the king. The king is sitting on his throne. All of the ministers and all of the servants and everyone, they just have to be in his presence. He doesn't even tell them what to do. He'll look, and then they'll say, okay, now time for me to do my job, time for me to do my job. That's that relationship, proximity. And everything depends on the Purusha, on the king, that way. In Vedanta, Vedanta uses Sankhya up until the very end. Then at the very end, it says, but this distinction is really a false one, that there's really oneness. Otherwise, that's why we see so much of Sankhya philosophy fully accepted. Only the ultimate conclusion of Sankhya, there's a dualistic conclusion, is denied in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. Other schools also, even if they believe in a personal God, then these powers belong to the personal God. In some of the Gaudiya Vaishnava system, the Radha represents the different Shaktis of Krishna, who represents Brahman. So it's, even there, they're not two separate things. There's some union of Radha and Krishna that way. So I'll read this again. When the Godhead is thought of as creating, preserving, and destroying. So these are gunas, not really gunas, really Shaktis. Anyhow, it is known as Saguna Brahman. I'm not going to say personal God here because a slight distinction there. Or the primal energy. So Adya Shakti, he's talking about this this Shakti, not as being something that added on to Ishvara, but as Ishvara himself, or Divine Mother herself. Again, when it is thought of as beyond the three gunas, then it is called the attributeless reality, Nirguna Brahman, beyond speech and thought. This is the supreme Brahman, Pada Brahman. Now, he's saying beyond speech and thought, this will tie in to this idea of the salt doll. That it's not only that the salt doll isn't really there to witness it at that time, but what can be seen has no attributes or anything. There's nothing to describe there. It's just oneness. It's just we have no words for it. Literally have no words for it. Under the spell of God's Maya, man forgets his true nature. Now, Maya also has two meanings. One is a cosmic. That is, Maya is the way that the Shakti will manifest. Sometimes it's used to indicate that this creation is not a real material type of creation. But in any event, Maya goes with the Brahman. Now, the Maya here, sometimes called avidya, he's talking about the Maya that comes upon an individual. After this whole act of creation has taken place, we're also born with Maya. That means that we're born lacking the knowledge of our real nature and falsely identifying with body, mind, senses, and everything else, personality. So under the spell of God's Maya, man forgets his true nature. He forgets that he is heir to the infinite glories of the Father. This divine Maya is made up of three gunas. Okay, now, this is one of the verses from the Gita, a very nice verse. This is Daiva Hiesha Gunamai. This is divine Maya of mine, is made up of the gunas. So we have, according to the different schools, we have Brahman on the one side and Maya. These two go together. Brahman and this divine power or mysterious power, whatever it is. We go down a little bit and make it a little more realistic. And we have Brahman and Shakti. So then the Shakti is not really a power of illusion, it's a power of actually projecting something. We go a little further down and this Maya becomes Prakriti. That means really material. These gunas are actual substantial types of things. So that'll be the Sankhya school. But we need something to go along with the Brahman. If we start with the Brahman and have nothing else, then we can't explain anything. Even if we say this is all an illusion, we can't explain why we have this experience of this illusion. We have a dream, we wake up and say it was just a dream. That doesn't explain why we had the dream. If we can say it wasn't real, then why do you want to know where it came from if it wasn't real? Well, it didn't have to come at all if it's not real, but it came. So we say Maya is not absolutely unreal because we see the effects of it. It's not absolutely real because it disappears with knowledge. So somewhere in between. Sadasad Vilakshana cannot be described as either real or unreal. Something a little bit. So Maya, we can't really explain what it is, and Brahman, we can't say anything about it. And yet we have thousands and thousands of philosophical works trying to explain these two things. This is that cosmic joke. We think we can understand these things with this small container of the mind. Tagore said it's like trying to pour in 5 gallons of milk in a 1 gallon jar. So this divine Maya is made up of the 3 gunas, and all 3 are robbers. Now, when we're talking about this divine Maya of Ishwara, then we're talking about that which creates the universe. When we're talking about this Maya for an individual, we're talking about the subtle gunas. We're talking about the tendencies of the mind and attachments to these tamasic ideas that we're attached to our laziness and the lack of enthusiasm, or rajas, that ambition and desire, or sattva, even that, there's a little desire to do good things and be kind and everything, a little bit of desire and attachment there also. So the 3 gunas, and all these are robbers, for they rob man of all his treasures and make him forget his true nature. The 3 gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. Of these, tamas alone points the way to God, but even sattva cannot take a man to God. We talk about 3 gunas. Actually, it's almost better to think of it as 2, as rajas and tamas together forming one group and sattva another group. Now, in Gita, of course, it says tamas will lower you, rajas will keep you the same, and sattva will take you up. But rajas also pulls us down. Rajas can be terrible. We'll see here. So, in terms of spiritual practice, that we can look upon tamas and rajas together as things that we want to eliminate. And sattva is that which we want. We don't want to start out with this idea, well, sattva is also binding, so I don't want to develop sattvic qualities. That'll be absolute foolishness. We have to develop these qualities before we can give them up. Sattva represents the final rungs of the ladder. So we have to get rid of, we start out with tamas, and then we have rajas and then sattva. If we say, I don't want to go through sattva even, but we won't get to the roof. So we have to go one after the other, get rid of all the lower ones, and once we get to sattva, then we're getting closer and closer. So we have to develop these sattvic qualities of love and devotion and compassion, kindness, all of these goodness. Let me tell you a story. Once a rich man was passing through a forest when 3 robbers surrounded him and robbed him of all his wealth. After snatching all his possessions from him, one of the robbers said, "What's the good of keeping the man alive? Kill him." Saying this, he was about to strike their victim with his sword, when the second robber interrupted and said, "There's no use in killing him. Let us bind him fast and leave him here. Then he won't be able to tell the police." Accordingly, the robbers tied him with a rope, left him, and went away. After a while, the third robber returned to the rich man and said, "Ah, you're badly hurt, aren't you? Come, I'm going to release you." The third robber set the man free and led him out of the forest. When they came near the highway, the robber said, "Follow this road and you will reach home easily." "But you must come with me too," said the man. "You have done so much for me. We shall all be happy to see you at our home." "No," said the robber, "it is not possible for me to go there. The police will arrest me." So saying, he left the rich man after pointing out his way. Now, the first robber, who said, "What's the good of keeping the man alive? Kill him," is tamas. It destroys. The second robber is rajas, which binds a man to the world and entangles him in a variety of activities. Rajas makes him forget God. Sattva alone shows the way to God. It produces virtues like compassion, righteousness, and devotion. Again, sattva is like the last step of the stairs. Next to it is the roof. The Supreme Brahman is man's own abode. One cannot attain the knowledge of Brahman unless one transcends the three gunas. So now he's telling us, we can get to the roof. Huh? They're very complicated. Now, when he says tamas can kill, that it's really true. That the tamas is really, it can be deep depression. It can be just falling into that terrible lethargy and indolence and not wanting to do anything and not feeling any power. It's really black. The gunas have their colors. The tamas is always thought of as black. It means darkness. And rajas is red. And sattva is white. So this tamas really, what do? We need rajas if we have that. It doesn't matter what it is, something to get us out of bed, something to get us to do something. Even if it's to earn money and to have enjoyment and wealth, something, so that at least we feel active, we feel that we're alive. So then, once we have a little bit of this rajas, then we can direct it towards something positive, and this is where sattva comes in.
Rajas has some pride, more like.
Rajas has pride, rajas has ambition. Some of these things, anger, jealousy, they could be considered tamasic or rajasic, both. The real distinctive element of tamas is this feeling of not wanting to do anything. Worse than laziness, but just helplessness, almost. Can't do anything. Swamiji hated this. He thought that this was the problem with the modern day youth of India. Modern, that means during his time. That they just, this mild, meek Hindu, he didn't like this idea, the mild Hindu. He said, no, strike back. Somebody does something, strike back. It's okay. You know that story, one boy came so mild and everything. Swamiji, yes, can you tell a lie? He's, oh, Swamiji, I could never tell a lie. He said, first learn to tell a lie. Huh? That means at least go to develop a little rajas just to get out of your tamas. You think that you're so sattvic and everything. Really, you just have no energy, no ambition, nothing. Not that he wanted anybody to lie, but just to develop a little bit of rajas that way. He used to say, tamas masquerading as sattva, that we think that we're very kind and sweet and nice people. We'll never yell at anybody. Somebody insults us, we won't say anything, everything. He said, no, this is a tamasic attitude. Somebody does something, somebody does something unrighteous, then do something. It's okay. Stand up for your rights. Once we reach the sattvic stage, then we also transcend that. That's not the highest state. But when we get to that higher stage, he said, Swamiji says that this non-reaction, he said, this is for the sadhu. The householder, to protect yourself, to protect your family and everything, you have to react. But if we reach that state of perfect renunciation, then we don't even have to react. Then we've transcended rajas to reach sattva. So the sattva is our greatest friend. Sattva is the one who points out the way, but we also have to leave it behind. In Gita, there's a section that talks about the bondage to the different gunas. And with the sattva, it's to goodness and kindness and knowledge and all of that. We develop a little pride also from that, and a little attachment to that. So we have to learn to transcend that. But that's the very end. We don't have to worry about that at this stage. We have to develop sattva before we can transcend sattva. And sattva is what eliminates the others. Rajas gets rid of tamas, sattva gets rid of rajas. This is the progression that we make. And we're all a combination. Sadashiva.
Do the masters stay in sattva, or do they occasionally come down into rajasic?
Yeah, those God-realized souls or avatars, those who have to live in this world, they have to have a little bit of rajas. But in a very sattvic way. That means at least a little bit of activity, something. That Tagore says that even gold, pure gold, is not very valuable. That it has to have a little bit of an alloy if you want to turn it into jewelry. Otherwise, it's too soft. So, taking the human mind, there'll be a little. So we'll see Tagore every once in a while. He'll get annoyed with something. Huh? We'll see experiencing also sadness and mourning those who pass away. All sorts of human emotions will be there. But it's not the same because there's no ego behind it, there's no attachment behind it. It doesn't last. These things are just, sometimes Tagore says, just the form of it, and not the reality of it. Like the line drawn on water, huh? This anger, Jole Dag, Sadhurag, Jole Dag. The anger of a holy person or godly person is just like a line drawn on water. It doesn't have any depth or strength to it. But yes, they'll have to have a little bit of this alloy, a little bit of rajas, maybe a little bit of tamas. They'll have to sleep also sometimes, but such a tiny bit, just enough to let them live in the world. Otherwise, the mind will go up. They'll be merged in the absolute. They won't be able to do anything. So I started to say we're all a combination, and it's very curious how some of us, well, I said everybody probably, in some areas are so sattvic, in other areas they're so tamasic. So we can be so, and in other areas rajasic, of course, we can have tremendous energy for some things. Other things we'll just constantly postpone doing it. We just can't bring ourselves to do it. I've seen some of our monks. One of our monks in particular was so sattvic. He was our artist Swami. Everything he did was just so pure and wonderful. You go into a room, it was a mess. It was dusty and everything. Of course, Tagore says that's a sign of sattva sometimes, but it's just that he just never got around to cleaning his room. The incense was burnt, the ashes will be there, make a big pile and everything. So we're all curious combination of these things, how first of all, from time to time, sometimes we'll be very kind and sweet, other times we'll lose our temper quickly. We don't know why. And sometimes in some areas, we're very energetic and active, and others, we procrastinate all of the time. So we're all a combination, and it's generally not very static. It's these gunas are fighting with each other. Sometimes one wins, sometimes another wins. There's a little game that goes on. All this is all part of the mind. This isn't any external thing. This is our own the qualities of the mind, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic qualities of the mind, battling each other. And we, of course, try to throw our weight on the sattvic part of the mind and do whatever we can so that when that tendency there is to get angry at someone, we let the sattvic part of the mind say, no. They're doing the best they can. They didn't mean it. Forget it. It's not going to make you feel better. Let it alone. So this is the way the mind works. Really, the Sankhya philosophy, despite the fact that it's dualistic, it has so many nice elements to it. This idea of, and we find it's very old. Sankhya is a very old philosophy. We find reference to the gunas in the Upanishads. It's probably as old as, at least as Vedanta, as the Upanishads. Preacher, you have given us a fine talk, sir. Master with a smile. Do you know the nature of devotees? When one devotee meets another, he says, let me speak and you listen, and when you speak, I shall listen. You are a preacher and teach so many people. You are a steamship, and I am a mere fishing boat. All laugh. We don't know who this preacher is. It's probably not one that we're familiar with. Shivnath Shastri or Vijay Goswami or something. They had many different, they were called the acharyas.
Tomra jahaj, amra jele dingi.
Jele dingi, yes, these little fishing boats. And the other is a big ship, jahaj. Okay, next day is Wednesday, May 2nd, again 1883. About 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Sri Ramakrishna arrived at the temple of the Brahmo Samaj in Nandan Bagan. So again, so many times, especially in the early days, these were the people that he visited, and they invited him for their different festivals and things, the Brahmo Samaj, accompanied by M, Rakal, and a few other devotees. So this is May 1883. Rakal has been coming for a couple of years. M has now been coming for over a year. At first, the master sat in the drawing room on the ground floor, where the Brahmo devotees gradually assembled. Rabindranath Tagore and a few other members of the Tagore family were present on this occasion. Now, as far as I can remember, this is the only reference to Tagore in the entire gospel. This is the only time that we never hear of Rabindranath, we never hear of Tagore visiting Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar. Now, is it impossible? It's not impossible. Could he have been on the ship when they all came? Could he have been with the group of devotees when Keshav came? I guess it's possible, but we never hear his name. Yeah. And he must have seen Thakur when Thakur went to different homes, or when he went to their main place, their temple, whatever they call it, their Brahmo Samaj, their meeting hall. He must have seen him at different times. But this is the only time when he specifically mentioned. The relationship between Tagore and Sri Ramakrishna is complicated. I don't want to say too much about it, because Tagore, even among our staunch Ramakrishna devotees, is a highly beloved figure in Bengal. And his poetry is beautiful. He brought great pride to Bengal as a Nobel laureate. And many of our Swamis love his songs. Our Swami Sarvadevanandi is one. And most of the devotees grow up with these songs. And when they learn singing when they're young, this is the Rabindra Shangit, this is what they'll learn. At the same time, there was always a little friction and clash between the Brahmo Samaj later and the Ramakrishna mission. It's very hard to say what anybody's real feeling was, because Tagore, he only wrote one poem, I think, we mentioned that last time, about Sri Ramakrishna, highly praising him. Of course, it was on the occasion of 100th birth anniversary, 100th birth anniversary that he said something.
1936, I think.
1936.
He presided over that convention.
Yeah. So partly, of course, was a completely different philosophy. That they very much were people of the Upanishads, or at least thought that they were, which meant that they didn't care much for any of the later image worship and things like that. But partly a little jealousy. Yeah, the little jealousy had to have been there. Maybe not with Tagore, but with others to a certain extent. The story is that Swamiji, or Narendra, was approached at one point, I guess, after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, and asked if he would become one of their big acharya or something. Keshav had passed away. He passed away a couple of years before Thakur did. And Vijay Krishna Goswami left also. So, and I think when Swamiji rebuffed them, probably they also didn't take that very well. So a very complicated relationship. But Tagore, really, whether we like his songs or not, he was one of the most important figures in Bengal. And his poetry is highly, highly appreciated by many people.
He wrote a few letters to Sarala Gosal of Brahmo Samaj.
Mm-hmm.
And Swami, after returning from the US, those letters are highly revealing, Maharaj.
Oh.
He specifically mentioned about this clash between these two.
Okay, so our Porbo is telling us.
No.
Yeah. Anybody who's really interested, I'm sure that there are letters and things that can be found. I don't want to go into it too much, but just so we have some kind of picture of this. The other thing is that Thakur went to see Tagore's father, Debendranath, and it's not 100% flattering. Not 100% flattering, number one. Number two, that Debendranath invited Thakur to come for the upcoming big festival. And then he said something very curious. He said, "But sir, please, when you come, please dress properly." Thakur generally didn't wear a shirt unless it was a cold weather. And he said a very funny thing. It would hurt me very much if people criticized you. A little bit ingenuine. Then later, Tagore laughingly said, later he sent me a letter, don't come. Yeah, if you can't dress like, then better that you don't come, something like that. So for the different reasons, maybe Tagore felt that his father was not presented very nicely in the gospel, something like that. But somehow he captured these beautiful Vedantic ideas and devotional ideas in his poetry. Yeah. So he's very highly thought of and regarded. Swami Bhudeshanandaji Maharaj, or one of the earlier presidents, he quotes from him very often. Many of our Swamis quote. So he somehow had this sensitivity. And the Shanti Niketan and other things that he started, really, there's not much left of the Brahmo Samaj today, but he really left his mark. He's one of the great figures, of India. So it's interesting that this is the only time that I remember that his name appears in the Gospel. Rabindranath Tagore and a few other members of the Tagore family were present on this occasion. Sri Ramakrishna was asked to go to the worship hall on the second floor. A dais had been built on the eastern side of the room. There were a few chairs and a piano in the hall. The Brahma worship was to begin at dusk. As soon as the master entered the worship hall, he bowed low before the dais. Having taken his seat, he said to M and the other devotees, Narendra once asked me, what good is there in bowing before the Brahmo Samaj temple? Because they didn't believe much in this imaging and worshiping, bowing down and all of that stuff. The sight of the temple recalls to my mind God alone. Then God consciousness is kindled in my mind. God is present where people talk about Him. One feels there the presence of all the holy places. Places of worship recall God alone to my mind. Once a devotee was overwhelmed with ecstasy at the sight of a babla tree. It may be from the Chaitanya, one of the stories of Chaitanya Deva. The idea flashed in his mind that the handle of the axe used in the garden of the temple of Radhakanta was made from the wood of the babla. Another devotee had such a devotion for his guru that he would be overwhelmed with a divine feeling at the sight of his guru's neighbors. Krishna consciousness would be kindled in Radha's mind at the sight of a cloud, a blue dress, or a painting of Krishna, because of the blue complexion. She would become restless and cry like a mad person, Krishna, where art thou? Then it goes on. Let me stop here. We'll get a funny question, Ghoshal, but madness is not desirable. Okay, we'll start with that next time. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanukham Bhatudaikraham Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Everyone, please stay well. Apparently there's good news that things are opening up. We're told that we don't have to wear masks anymore, that people can come and gather together. So we'll see if next month or shortly after that, we'll be able to have people come here for the Sunday talks and everything. We'll, of course, let everyone know through our email, through our monthly bulletin. At the very least, those who are vaccinated and 2 weeks in, please don't hesitate to come, and you don't have to wear a mask when you come. Also, this is the new guideline. Okay, thank you all. We'll see you next time.